My name is Ethan, and I'm 28 years old. I've been out since I was 19, navigating life in a small coastal town in Oregon where everyone knows everyone's business. I'd learned to keep my heart on lockdown, especially around guys like Liam Carter, my best friend since high school, the kind of guy who could make you forget how to breathe with just a glance. Liam was 6'2" of rugged charm, with jet black hair that fell in waves over his forehead, hazel eyes that shifted between gold and green depending on the light, and a lopsided grin that could unravel me in seconds. We'd been inseparable for a decade, bonded over surf sessions at dawn, late-night bonfires, and a shared obsession with the ocean. But for me, every moment with Liam was a tightrope walk between friendship and the ache of wanting more. This is the story of how a 3-day kayaking trip down the Rogue River flipped my world upside down. The plan was simple. 3 days paddling and camping along the Rogue, a wild and scenic river cutting through southern Oregon's Siskiyou Mountains. It was late August, and the air was warm but carried the faintest hint of fall. Liam had pitched the trip months ago, his eyes sparkling with that infectious enthusiasm that made it impossible to say no. "Just us, Ethan," he'd said. "No distractions, no drama. Just the river and the wild." I'd agreed, even though the thought of being alone with him for 3 days felt like tempting fate. We stood at the put-in point near Grave Creek, our kayaks loaded with gear. The river stretched out before us, a ribbon of emerald green framed by dense forests and jagged cliffs. Other groups were prepping nearby, families, adventure bros, a few seasoned paddlers. I noticed a couple of guys in their 40s laughing as they adjusted their life jackets, their hands brushing in a way that screamed intimacy. One of them caught my eye and winked, like he could sense the longing I tried to bury. I looked away, heat creeping up my neck. "Yo, Ethan, you zoning out already?" Liam's voice snapped me back. He was hoisting his kayak into the water, his flannel shirt rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms tanned from years of surfing. "Ready to get wet?" "Born ready," I shot back, forcing a grin. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. 3 days. I could handle 3 days with Liam, no matter how much his presence made my pulse race. We pushed off into the current, the river cool and alive beneath us. The first few hours were pure magic. The Rogue was gentle at first, winding through meadows dotted with golden grass and wild blackberries. Liam paddled ahead, his strokes strong and rhythmic, occasionally glancing back to check on me. "You good back there, city boy?" he teased. I'd moved to Portland for work a few years ago, and he never let me forget it. "I'm literally from the same town as you, Liam," I called back, splashing him with my paddle. He laughed, the sound echoing off the canyon walls, and my chest tightened. That laugh, it was my favorite sound in the world, and it hurt just as much as it thrilled me. We talked as we paddled, falling into the easy rhythm we'd perfected over years. Work, he was a wildfire fighter, I was a graphic designer, mutual friends, his dad's new hobby of brewing terrible beer. Safe topics. But there was something different about Liam today, a restlessness in his voice I couldn't place. I chalked it up to the breakup he'd mentioned in passing a few weeks ago. Sarah, his girlfriend of 8 months, had ended things. She said I was too distant, he'd told me over beers. Like I wasn't all in. I'd nodded, murmuring sympathy, while a traitorous part of me wondered what it meant. By midday, the river picked up pace and we hit our first set of rapids. Class 2. Nothing crazy, but enough to get the adrenaline pumping. Liam whooped as he navigated a drop, his kayak slicing through the white water like he was born for it. I followed, my heart pounding as the river tossed me around. When we reached a calm stretch, he pulled alongside me, grinning like a kid. "That's the stuff, right?" "Hell yeah," I said, catching my breath. His hair was soaked, clinging to his face, and his wet shirt hugged his chest in a way that made me grateful for the cold river water keeping me grounded. We stopped for lunch on a gravel bar, sprawled out on a tarp with sandwiches and trail mix. The sun was high, warming the rocks around us. Liam peeled off his shirt to dry it, and I busied myself with my water bottle, trying not to stare at the way his muscles moved when he stretched. "So," I said, desperate to fill the silence. You ever gonna tell me what really went down with Sarah? He sighed, tossing a pebble into the river. Not much to tell. She wasn't wrong. I wasn't there. Not the way she needed. He paused, his jaw tight. I've been figuring some stuff out, you know? About what I want. Who I am? My stomach flipped. Heavy stuff for a kayak trip, I said, aiming for light but landing somewhere closer to nervous. He chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Yeah, well, the river's good for thinking. We paddled on, the canyon growing narrower, the cliffs towering above us. The scenery was breathtaking. Waterfalls cascading into the river, ospreys circling overhead, the air thick with the scent of cedar and wet stone. But the undercurrent between us was impossible to ignore. Every glance, every laugh felt loaded with meaning I didn't dare name. By late afternoon, we reached our first campsite, a sandy beach tucked against a bend in the river. My arms were screaming from hours of paddling, and Liam looked just as wiped, though he hid it behind that easy grin. I'm claiming first dibs on the river, he said, kicking off his shoes. Gotta wash off the day. Go for it, I said, unloading gear. I focused on setting up our tent, a two-person dome we'd shared on countless trips. But as Liam stripped down to his swim trunks and waded into the river, I couldn't help stealing glances. The water lapped at his waist, his back muscles flexing as he dove under. He surfaced with a shout, shaking water from his hair. It's cold as hell, Ethan. Get in here. I laughed, grateful for the distraction. Give me a minute. I finished staking the tent, my hands clumsier than usual. When I joined him, the river was a shock of ice against my skin, but it felt good, cleansing, like it could wash away the tension coiled in my chest. Liam splashed me, and for a moment we were just two idiots messing around, like we'd been at 16. But when he grabbed my arm to steady himself in the current, his touch lingered and the air shifted. Back at camp, we cooked dinner over a campfire, freeze-dried curry Liam swore was gourmet. The sky was a riot of orange and pink, the river reflecting the sunset like a mirror. We ate sitting on a driftwood log, the crackle of the fire filling the silence. Liam was quieter than usual, picking at his food. Finally, he spoke. Ethan, can I ask you something? Shoot, I said, my heart already racing. He set his bowl down, staring into the flames. You ever feel like you've been lying to yourself? Like there's this truth you're scared to look at, so you just keep it buried? I swallowed hard. Yeah, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. More than you know. He looked at me then, his hazel eyes catching the firelight. I've been thinking about us. About our friendship. About why I've always felt different with you, my breath caught. Different how? He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. I don't know how to say this without sounding insane. Sarah, she said I was holding back and she was right. But it wasn't just with her. It's been my whole life. I've dated women, I've done what everyone expects, but it's never felt complete. Not the way I feel when I'm with you. The world narrowed to his voice, the river's murmur, the pounding in my ears. Liam, what are you saying? He took a shaky breath. I asked you on this trip because I needed to be away from everything. My job, my family, all the noise. I needed to be with you, someone I trust more than anyone. Because I think... He stopped, his hands clenching. I think I've been in love with you for years, Ethan. And I've been too damn scared to admit it. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The fire popped, sending sparks into the night. You're serious, I finally managed. Yeah, he said, his voice raw. I know you probably don't feel the same and I'm freaking out here, but I had to say it. I'm done pretending. I laughed, a broken sound, and then I was moving. I crossed the space between us in 2 steps, cupping his face and kissing him. For a second, he was still and panic surged through me. Then his hands gripped my waist, pulling me closer, and he kissed me back. It was messy, desperate, years of longing crashing together. He tasted like curry and smoke and everything I'd dreamed of. When we pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine, his breath ragged. I was hoping you'd do that, he whispered. You just said you're in love with me, I said, my voice shaking. What did you expect? He laughed, the sound shaky but real. I don't know. That you'd think I'm having an identity crisis? That I'm your straight friend losing it? You're not straight, Liam, I said softly. No, he agreed, his eyes searching mine. I don't know what I am yet. Bi, maybe, or just yours. But I'm not straight, and I'm done lying about it. Tears stung my eyes. I've been in love with you since we were 17, I admitted. Every surf session, every bonfire, every time you smiled at me, I was yours, and I thought I'd have to live with that forever. His face crumpled. All this time, I'm so sorry, Ethan. Hey, I said, taking his hand. Our fingers intertwined, and the simple touch felt like a lifeline. We're here now. The night was cold, the stars blazing above the canyon. We banked the fire and crawled into the tent, the space suddenly too small and too vast. We'd shared tents before, but the night was cold, the stars blazing above the canyon. We banked the fire and crawled into the tent, the space suddenly too small and too vast. We'd shared tents before, but this was different. Liam hesitated, then unzipped his sleeping bag and motioned for out style. I unzipped mine and we zipped them together, creating one cocoon. He slid in beside me, his body warm against mine. I wrapped an arm around him and he buried his face in my neck, his breath steadying. Ethan, he murmured. Yeah? This is real, right? I kissed the top of his head. It's real. The next 2 days were a blur of river and revelation. We paddled through rapids that left us screaming with laughter, camped under skies so clear the Milky Way looked close enough to touch. Liam was open in a way I'd never seen, talking about his fears, his confusion, the years he'd spent trying to be someone he wasn't. I shared my own pain, the nights I'd cried over him, the walls I'd built to survive loving him. On the final night, we camped at a secluded spot near Mule Creek Canyon. The river roared nearby, a constant soundtrack. We lay in our joined sleeping bags, the tent glowing faintly from a lantern. Liam traced patterns on my chest, his touch tentative but sure. I'm scared, he admitted, of what comes next. My family, my crew, they're not exactly progressive. We'll figure it out, I said, lacing my fingers with his. Together. He smiled, that lopsided grin I loved. Together. As the river sang outside, I held him close, the weight of years lifting. The rogue had carried us through rapids and calm, through fear and truth. And somewhere along its winding path, we'd found each other. The first time I saw Liam cry, we were 21 and drunk on cheap vodka in the back of a campus shuttle. He'd just found out his scholarship was being cut because his grades had slipped, one bad semester after his mom's diagnosis. He pressed his forehead to the fogged window and whispered, I'm letting everyone down. I didn't know what to say, so I put my hand on the back of his neck and left it there until the driver kicked us off at the dorms. That was the night I started cataloging the small, private sounds he made when he thought no one was listening, the hitch in his throat, the soft click of his swallow, the way he exhaled like the world had punched him in the ribs. 8 years later, those sounds still lived in my head, only now they were layered with new ones. The rasp of his stubble against my palm when he turned into my touch, the low hum he made when I kissed the notch at the base of his throat, the sharp intake of breath when my fingers found the scar on his hip from a childhood bike crash. We were supposed to be celebrating his 29th birthday with a 3-day backpacking trip in the Cascades. But the sky had other plans. We'd pitched our tents on a gravel bar beside a glacier-fed lake. The water so clear you could see cutthroat trout flickering like silver coins. Liam had insisted on carrying the heavier pack because, it's my birthday, let me be useful. I'd rolled my eyes but let him, because arguing with Liam when he was determined was like arguing with gravity. That night, after freeze-dried pad thai and a shared flask of bourbon, he'd looked at me across the campfire and said, I'm tired of pretending I don't want this. Then he kissed me. Clumsy and urgent, tasting like smoke and peppermint gum. I kissed him back until the fire burned down to embers and the stars pressed close enough to touch. Morning came with rain. Not the gentle northwest drizzle we were used to, but a hard sideways assault that turned the trail into a slick of mud and pine needles. We'd planned to hike 8 miles to a backcountry cabin, but the creek we needed to ford had become a brown, churning monster. Liam studied the map, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. "We could wait it out," he said, but his voice cracked on the last word. He was thinking about his mom again, how she'd died in a hospital bed while he was stuck in traffic on I-5, how he'd promised himself he'd never be late for anything that mattered again. I touched his wrist. "We'll make it." We started across the log bridge that spanned the creek, single file, boots slipping on moss. Halfway over, the log shifted. Liam's arms windmilled. I lunged, grabbing his pack strap just as the bridge gave way. We fell together, the shock of cold water closing over us like a fist. The current dragged us downstream, tumbling us over rocks. I lost my grip on his strap, found his hand instead. His fingers were ice. We fought to the surface, gasping, and I saw the terror in his eyes, not for himself, but for me. "Don't you dare let go!" he shouted, voice raw. We washed up on a gravel bar downstream, bruised and shaking. Liam's left boot was gone, his sock bloody from a gash on his ankle. My pack was somewhere at the bottom of the creek. We had one knife, half a protein bar, and the clothes on our backs. The cabin was still 3 miles away, through dense cedar and devil's club. Liam tried to stand, winced, and sat back down. "I can't," he said, and the defeat in his voice cut deeper than the cold. I knelt in front of him, cupping his face. "You don't have to. We do this together." I tore the sleeve off my thermal shirt, wrapped his ankle tight. Then I helped him up, took his weight against my side. We moved slowly, his breath hitching with every step. The rain eased to a mist, but the forest was a maze of fallen logs and hidden drop-offs. At one point, Liam stumbled, and we both went down in a tangle of limbs and wet ferns. He laughed, actually laughed, a broken sound that turned into a sob. "This is the worst birthday ever." I kissed the mud from his cheek. "It's the best one. You're here. I'm here. That's enough." We found the cabin at dusk, a squat A-frame with a tin roof and a porch sagging under the weight of years. Inside, it smelled of mildew and old smoke, but there was a wood stove, a stack of split alder, and a tin of matches sealed in a plastic bag. Liam collapsed onto the lower bunk while I got the fire going. His teeth were chattering so hard I could hear them over the crackle of flames. I stripped him down to his boxers, hung our clothes on nails above the stove. His skin was goose-fleshed and pale, except for the purple bloom of bruises along his ribs. I traced them with careful fingers, memorizing the map of what we'd survived. He caught my hand, pressed it to his chest. "I need to tell you something." His voice was small, almost lost in the hiss of the fire. "When we were in the water, I thought, this is it. And the only thing I regretted was not telling you sooner. Every day for 8 years I've wanted to say it, and I was too scared." I leaned in, forehead to forehead. "Say it now." "I love you, Theo. Not like a friend. Not like a brother. I love you like I want to wake up next to you when we're old and cranky and arguing over who left the cap off the toothpaste. I love you like I'd follow you into any storm." The words cracked something open in my chest. I kissed him, slow and deliberate, tasting salt and smoke and the faint metallic tang of fear. "I love you too," I whispered against his mouth. I've been saying it in my head since the night on the shuttle. I just didn't know how to make it real. We fell asleep tangled together on the narrow bunk, the stove popping and settling. Outside, the rain softened to a whisper against the tin roof. I dreamed of the creek, of Liam's hand slipping from mine. But then his fingers tightened, and I woke to find him watching me in the firelight. "Happy birthday," I said. He smiled, the kind that reached his eyes and made the bruises look less brutal. "Best one yet." We spent the next day drying out, patching clothes with duct tape from the cabin's emergency kit, sharing the last of the protein bar. Liam found a battered deck of cards in a drawer and taught me a game his mom had played with him as a kid. Some complicated version of gin rummy that ended with us laughing so hard my ribs ached. When the sun broke through late afternoon, we stepped outside to a world washed clean. The creek had receded to a gentle murmur. Our packs were gone, but we had each other, and that felt like more than enough. On the hike out the next morning, Liam limped but refused my offer to carry him. "I've got 2 good legs and 1 stubborn heart," he said. Halfway down the trail, he stopped, pulled a small cedar box from his pocket, the one he'd carved last winter, the one he'd been saving for something special. Inside was a simple band of hammered silver. "I was going to wait for a better moment," he said, cheeks flushed. "But after yesterday, I don't want to wait for anything anymore." I slipped the ring onto my finger, then took his hand and slid a matching one onto his. The metal was cool against his skin, warming quickly. We didn't need vows or witnesses. The mountains had already seen us at our worst and our best. Years later, when people asked how we knew, I'd tell them about the creek, the cabin, the way Liam's hand felt in mine when the world was ending. But the real answer was simpler. It was the night on the shuttle, the hitch in his throat, the way he let me hold him together when he was falling apart. Everything else was just the long, beautiful echo of that moment. The storm hit just after we'd pitched the tent on the north ridge of Mount Baker, a late-season squall that rolled in off the Pacific like a living thing. Rain hammered the nylon. Wind clawed at the guy leans until they sang. Inside, 2 headlamps bobbed like fireflies while Ethan and I, Jordan, tried to keep the cards from scattering. "Gin," Ethan said, laying down his hand with the same calm he used to close multi-million-dollar deals. I groaned. "You're cheating. You have to be. Skill, my friend. Pure skill." We'd been friends since freshman orientation at UW, bonded over mutual sarcasm and a shared hatred of group projects. Ethan was the golden boy, tall, dark-haired, the kind of guy who could sell sand in a desert. I was the quieter one, the designer who could sketch a logo in the time it took most people to open Photoshop. Everyone assumed we were brothers, or at least cousins. No one ever guessed the truth, that I'd been in love with him since the night he carried me home from a party after I'd drunk texted my ex. The tent zipper jammed halfway. Ethan wrestled it open and we spilled out into the gale. The creek we'd crossed that morning had become a brown torrent. Our bridge, a fallen cedar, was gone. "We're not making it down tonight," I shouted over the wind. Ethan's face was pale but set. "Shelter first. Then we reassess." We found the ranger cabin by luck in the last bar of cell service. It was a squat, moss-roofed box with a potbelly stove and a single window rattling in its frame. Inside smelled of pine pitch and old coffee. We stripped off soaked layers, hung them like surrender flags, and took inventory. 1 working headlamp, half a bag of trail mix, 2 thermoses of now-cold tea. Ethan's teeth chattered. "Hypothermia's a bitch. Body heat?" I laughed to cover the way my pulse spiked. "You offering to be Big Spoon?" "Only if you promise not to steal the blanket." We zipped our bags together. The storm screamed outside. Inside, the space between us shrank to inches. I could feel the tremor in his ribs, the way he fought to keep his breathing steady. "Jordan," he said, voice low. "If we don't make it, we will. Listen. I need to say this while I still can." He turned so we were nose to nose, his eyes reflecting the stove's orange glow. "I've been lying to myself for years. About everything. About who I am. About you." The words hung there, heavier than the thunder. I swallowed. "Ethan, I'm queer," he said, the confession cracking open like ice on a pond. "And I'm in love with you. Have been since the night you drew that stupid cartoon of me as a superhero on the dorm whiteboard." I laughed, a broken sound. "You kept that?" "Still in my desk drawer." He brushed a thumb across my cheek, catching a raindrop or maybe a tear. I was terrified. My parents, the firm, the whole damn blueprint they drew for my life. But almost dying in a creek makes priorities real clear. I kissed him then, clumsy and desperate, tasting pine needles and fear. The stove popped. The wind howled. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "Tell me this isn't just adrenaline," he whispered. "It's been 10 years of adrenaline," I said. Morning came silver and sharp. The storm had scoured the sky clean. We limped back to camp, Ethan favoring a twisted ankle, me with a bruise blooming across my ribs. The tent had survived. Our friendship had not. It had become something fiercer. We packed in silence that felt sacred. Ethan tested his weight on the ankle, winced, handed me the heavier pack without discussion. At the trail fork, he stopped, looked back at the mountain. "Part of me wants to stay up here," he said. "No boardrooms, no expectations. Just us," I took his hand. "We'd run out of coffee in a week." He laughed, the sound bright against the granite. "Fair." The descent took 6 hours instead of 3. We talked in fragments, his dread of telling his father, my fear that our friend group would fracture, the logistics of sharing a 1-bedroom in Capitol Hill. Every switchback felt like peeling off another layer of the old life. Cell service returned with a vengeance. 47 missed calls, 112 texts. A voicemail from Ethan's assistant that began, "Sir, the Tokyo deal." He deleted it without listening. Near the trailhead, a family of day hikers passed us. The dad nodded at our joined hands, offered a quiet, "Nice day" for it. Ethan's answering smile was shy but unflinching. His SUV smelled of leather, and the pine air freshener he insisted was ironic. We drove with the windows down. Radio off, hands bridged across the console. "Dinner?" I asked. "Somewhere with booths," he said. "I want to sit on the same side like teenagers." The diner off I-5 had checkered floors and a waitress named Darla who called everyone Han. She poured coffee without asking, eyed our intertwined fingers, and said, "You two look like you survived something." "We did," Ethan told her. Back in Seattle, we crashed at my loft. Ethan's penthouse felt too much like the old life. We showered in shifts, too raw for shared steam, then ate cold lo mein straight from the carton while sprawled on the couch. "I should call my parents tomorrow," he said. "I'll be there." He traced the rim of the carton. "What if they raised you to be honest? Let's trust that." His parents lived in a cedar-shingled house on Mercer Island, the kind of place that smelled faintly of lemon polish and old money. Mrs. Chen, Lillian, opened the door in yoga pants and pearls, enveloping Ethan in a hug that smelled of Chanel. Mr. Chen, David, shook my hand with the same grip he'd used at Ethan's graduation. We sat in the sunroom overlooking the lake. Lillian served matcha lattes and those butter cookies that come in blue tins. Ethan's knee bounced under the table. I pressed my foot against his. "Mom, Dad," he began, voice steady only because he'd rehearsed it in the car. "I'm bisexual, and Jordan is my partner." The silence was soft, lake quiet. Lillian set her cup down with a porcelain click. David removed his reading glasses, folded them with deliberate care. Finally, David spoke. "When you were 8, you told us you wanted to be an astronaut. We bought you a telescope. Plans change," he looked at me. "As long as you're happy, son. And as long as Jordan treats you right." Lillian was already crying, but they were the good kind. She pulled us both into a hug that smelled of cookies and home. "We love you. Both of you." Later, David cornered me by the koi pond. He's always been my cautious one. "Don't let him hide again." "I won't," I promised. The next month was a controlled burn. We told our friends over tacos and tequila. Marcus actually pumped his fist and yelled, "About damn time." Ethan came out to the executive team. HR sent a congratulatory fruit basket. We learned the rhythm of each other's mornings. Ethan's need for silence before coffee, my habit of leaving sketches on the fridge. Our first fight was over a leaky faucet and whose turn it was to call the plumber. We made up on the kitchen floor, laughing at how domestic we'd become. 3 months in, Ethan moved into my loft. We painted the second bedroom sage green and argued over bookshelves. On the anniversary of the storm, we returned to Baker with better gear and a bottle of champagne. I proposed at the exact GPS coordinate where the creek had tried to claim him. The ring was white gold, etched with the elevation of the ranger cabin. He said yes before I finished the question. 5 years later, we stood in the community center we'd helped fund, Its walls painted the same sage as our spare room. Ethan, now Mitchell Chen because hyphenates are for people who refuse to choose, held the mic like he was born to it. "Half a decade ago," he said, "I thought coming out would cost me everything. Instead, it gave me the world." He looked at me. "And the best co-founder a guy could ask for." The Foundation's first program sent queer kids into the Cascades with therapists and climbing guides. We called it Stormbreak. After the speeches, Lillian found us by the dessert table. "Your father's already bragging to the country club," she whispered. "Says his son's changing lives." In the car, Ethan was quiet until we hit the bridge. "Do you ever think about the alternate timeline, where I never said anything?" "Every day," I admitted. Then I look at the nursery paint swatches in the glove box and remember we're living the better draft. We were adopting a little girl from Tacoma whose file photo showed a gap-toothed grin and a love of dinosaurs. The spare room was half finished, mobile of paper pterodactyls spinning above an empty crib. At home, Ethan kicked off his shoes, padded to the kitchen, started pulling out ingredients for carbonara. I wrapped my arms around him from behind, chin on his shoulder. "Best yes I ever gave," I said. He turned in my arms, flour on his cheek. "Best yes I ever received." Outside, Seattle sparkled under a rare clear sky. Inside, the pasta boiled, the mobile spun, and two men who'd once been too afraid to speak their truth built a life loud with love, one ordinary, extraordinary evening at a time.